I'ma make you an offer you can't refuse. Hand over your... Why do these morons keep thinking trying to mess with someone who's open carrying a rocket launcher is a good idea? I can't even chalk it up to Darwinism at this point. It's been going on for over a year and I still haven't learned. Anyway, I'm Ian, and this is the Streets of Rogue character guide to the Mobster.
Hey crew, I know you guys have been working really hard and I've got some good news. And some bad news. The good news is we're in debt to the mob! No, wait, that's the bad news. Also, there's no good news.
The Mobster is unlocked via paying the Mafia to rig the mayoral election in your favor. This alone will not win you the election, but it can help especially on disaster floors where you might not have time to campaign voters in your favor. As for the Mobster's backstory, it reads, the Mobster lives by several guiding principles. Cash is king, family is forever, and dinner is divine. Breaking this balanced trifecta of money, loyalty, and heaping helpings of carbohydrates would make for one cranky criminal. With mayoral power, cash and noodles are guaranteed to flow freely to the Mobster and their clan. As for your starting setup, you have an average of 2 in all your attributes except for firearms, which is a respectable 3. So use firearms over melee weapons when you get the opportunity to do so, which will be harder than you might think since you don't start with any guns in your starting inventory. Instead, you have a baseball bat for melee combat, a mini fridge to boost the healing items you also don't start with, and 2 friend phones, because while starting with a gun or any food is too much to ask for, the ability to call for backup isn't, apparently. As for your starting traits, you have the team building expert trait, just like the previously covered comedian and gorilla, meaning your follower cap is 3 instead of the usual 1, as well as the friend of the family trait, making it so that other mobsters are allied to you, meaning they will help you out instead of trying to shake you down for free stuff in the downtown levels. This trait is so good I always make a point to try to grab it whenever I can on my runs, since having mobsters on your side instead of working against you is just amazing. This is because out of all the threats you'll be typically dealing with on your average run of Streets of Rogue, the only things that are more dangerous than the mobsters are police lockdowns in the uptown floors and disaster floors in general. Meaning this trait effectively turns the third biggest threat to your typical run of this game into an active asset. In addition, you also have the Mugger trait. This trait allows you to intimidate NPCs to give you money, much like how you can do for mission items. You also have the corruption cost trait, which makes it so that you need to bribe the police or else super cops will start to spawn on every floor to try to hunt you down, even on floors where cops don't normally spawn, like the parks. If you can't find a non-hostile police officer to bribe in order to get this trait to not be screwing you over, you can always go to your local ATM. Unless, of course, the police blew up the ATM when they were shooting at you because you didn't pay them off at the local ATM. Because of the possibility of situations like this, I strongly recommend picking up the trait Random Reverence, since it gives you a plan B for when the ATM explodes and the police are hostile, since it means that sometimes a police officer will be allied to you despite the corruption cost trait. These allied police officers will even give you a discount for what you need to pay off. And if you were wondering how you're going to be able to get enough money to pay off the corruption costs in the first place, that answer goes to your extortionist trait. This trait allows you to intimidate NPC vendors into giving you money on each floor. This sometimes results in you being forced to fight said shopkeepers in order to get them to pay up, but once you do manage to convince them, they will become submissive and pay you up each time you enter a new floor. Doing this will be almost mandatory in order to keep up with the corruption cost expenses, but it's also mandatory if you wish to complete your big quest. Speaking of which, let's go over that next.
The Don sends his regards.
Your big quest is called Sultan of Shakedowns. In this big quest, you must use your extortionist trait on 42 vendors before reaching the mayor's village. If you reach the mayor's village having done this quest correctly, the money you get from shaking down NPCs goes up considerably, and using intimidation in dialogue actually has a much higher chance of succeeding in the first place. When using intimidation to get what you want out of NPCs in this game, please remember that the weapons and followers you have will affect the odds. This means while you can use intimidation by just pointing a knife at someone in a dark alley to get what you want, you're actually far more likely to get what you want by pointing a rocket launcher at them instead, ideally with 2 followers in tow. And since the Mobster has access to friend phones both through their starting inventory and by extension the loadout-o-matics, you should never be short on having friends to back you up when you need them most. The Mobster's Big Quest offers a degree of flexibility that isn't present on most characters' big quests, in the sense that you can actually completely fail on individual floors, yet still be able to complete it once you reach the mayor's village. This is because while you do need to get 3 NPCs per floor in order to get an EXP boost for completing this big quest, if your goal is to actually complete the quest itself and you don't care about how much EXP you get from doing it, all you have to do is make sure that 42 NPCs are paying protection money by the time you reach the mayor's village. Doesn't matter if 5 to 10 of those NPCs are all on one floor, so long as 42 of them in total are paying up, you'll be able to complete this big quest. This can be fantastic for you since you no longer have to worry about petty issues like the zombie disaster killing all the vendors before you can shake them down for money, or needing to worry about vendors fighting back instead of paying up in the uptown floors because I have 20 guards and you're by yourself. Because you were smart and decided that instead of trying to get every shopkeeper on the floor to pay out money no matter how heavily guarded they were, you decided just to get a bunch of drug dealers in the slums and park levels to pay up instead. With the money you'll be accumulating with this quest, you should have no issues having the revenue needed to pay off the corruption costs, unless you're in the park and can't find an ATM or cop to pay up at. I recommend grabbing the random reverence trait if you can, since it can sometimes affect cops, and these cops will end up giving you a discount to the bribe costs you need to pay up each floor. This makes the random reverence trait the only real solution to the problem known as all the cops are hostile because I forgot to pay them off and the ATM exploded. Amusingly, the mobster can be very good at rigging elections in your favor, since you can just use the friend phone in your starting inventory to summon some mobsters and then pay those guys off to rig the election in your favor each floor. But with corruption costs constantly draining your wallet, this is unlikely to happen, since unless you have some sort of trick up your sleeve to get even more money than you would get from your big quest, such as having a trust funder trait, or some sort of exploit up your sleeve, it's very unlikely you'll be able to get the money you need to be able to both pay off the police so they don't shoot you on sight, and still have the cash left over to rig elections in your favor, even with your family discount. All in all, I give the mobster an intimidation out of 10. If you want to use words to intimidate people to hand over what you want out of sheer fear, the mobster is the best character for you. That's all for now, though. Like the video if you did, subscribe if you don't want to miss the next one, comment what you want to see me cover in the future. I've been Ian, you have been you, and this has been my Streets of Rogue character guide to the mobster. And stay tuned, the scientist is coming up next.